Now, our top story today, Israel has expanded its ground offensive into refugee camps in Central Gaza, as it warns that the war could now last for months.
Well, it comes as the Hamas-run health ministry says that over 21,000 people have been killed in the Palestinian territory since the start of the war.
Here to discuss this is Israeli journalist Jotam Confino, who joins us live from Tel Aviv, and Remington Franklin, the executive director of Bulletproof Israel. Remington, we'll come to you first. So I know you're American, but after the October 7th atrocity, you flew straight to Israel. So can you just tell us, what is Bulletproof Israel, and what have you been doing over there?
Yeah, so hello and good morning from Israel. Bulletproof Israel's whole mission is providing, whether it's tactical equipment or CAT tourniquets or medical supplies to the IDF and then the surrounding forces, as well as combating disinformation and definitely supporting the hostage families. After the war, our focus will be mental health because there's a lot of trauma here right now.
Okay, and I understand you went to Be'eri, Kfar Azar, and Nor Hal-Oz kibbutz.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about that and tell us exactly how that was when you were there?
It's very emotional, and for a lot of it's not for the faint of heart. You can see and smell the death that's there, and also just the complete destruction. There's a lot of people that walk through and tell you the stories of the individuals that live there, because not everyone in the kibbutz or those villages passed away. So when you hear from a local that tells you this is where my best friend lived or this is where my aunt lived, and you hear the stories, it's traumatizing. But the other interesting part too is that after Hamas had actually committed the massacre while the bodies were still smoldering, Gazan civilians looted a lot of the houses. So a lot of the damage isn't just done by Hamas, it's actually done by looting, which is not really known, but you can see the damage when you're there.
Remington, we'll come back to you in a minute. I just want to get an update from you, Jotam, as to what you're seeing. Obviously, we're hearing in the news today that the ground offensive is moving into refugee camps. That will be alarming a lot of people.
Yeah, but it's not anything new, really. Israel has conducted military operations in refugee camps in Gaza from the beginning of the ground operation. Jabalia is one of them. And I think it's important to explain what kind of refugee camps we're talking about, because for most people, when they hear the word refugee camp, they'll think about Syria, they'll think about tents, they'll think about absolute misery. Now, these refugee camps are not like that. They are cities, more or less. They're large residential buildings, apartments, and more alarming, Hamas is present there. Like I said, Jabalia, for example, is one of the refugee camps, which is called a Hamas stronghold. Hamas is not only physically present there, it's also fighting Israeli soldiers from there. It has its tunnels underneath underneath schools and hospitals in the areas. So that's why Israel is going in there. It's not going in there just to cause havoc. It's going in there to eradicate Hamas and to dismantle its infrastructure. Now, that being said, when you operate in these kinds of areas where civilians are, it will be horrendous for the civilians because they'll be caught in crossfire, which is also why we see such a high civilian death toll.
Yes, and as we were saying in the introduction to you, death toll now reportedly 21,000. Jotam, I'd love to know what your view is now of how the average Israeli is viewing Benjamin Netanyahu's leadership throughout this war. We read a lot in our newspapers here that he's not being supported by the majority of the population. Is that how you're reading the situation?
Absolutely, and it's not only how I read it, it's also what the numbers tell us. All polls basically say the same. Most Israelis would like Netanyahu to resign either now or after the war, and his Likud party will be almost halved if there were elections tomorrow, and his government would lose some 20 seats. So he is wildly unpopular, and for many reasons. Netanyahu has been able to maneuver all these scandals that he has behind him in the past couple of years, but this is a different situation. This is something that Israelis cannot and will not accept, that a leader who has been in charge for years has basically allowed Hamas to grow strong by allowing billions of dollars to come in. at the detriment of the Palestinian Authority, and also that failing to prevent October 7th from happening. He has not taken responsibility for it, and he's currently trying to switch blame to the intelligence branches, to the military. That's not a leader. That's not what people would like to see. People would like to see the leader take responsibility and face up to what happened.
Remington, I want to speak to you about the hostages. There's still over 100 believed to still be alive in Gaza. Children, women. One particular that caught our attention, Naomi Levy, the 19-year-old, who was part of the non-profit organisation Hands of Peace, where they are literally trying to bring peace between Israel and Palestinians. And yet Hamas still have just targeted people seemingly indiscriminately.
Yeah, Nama's a very special one. I've become very close to the family. I'm very invested in her and her story. If you don't know, she was the young girl that was dragged out of the Jeep. So it's a very stark and shocking image for a lot of people. And Nama was a joy, and her family misses her, as all the hostage family does. But talking about that too, there's also the Bibas family. You've got 2 young children that are still there. A baby who's going to celebrate his first birthday in a terror tunnel. And Israel's hurting. They want their family back. And I think it's a part in time where we don't understand, as you know, I understand now as a foreigner, but imagine if, you know, anyone came into your country and kidnapped people that you know, because this country's not that large. Everyone knows someone that's affected, or knew someone from the party, or someone that's been kidnapped. And I think the thing is, they're screaming and they're crying and they're asking every world government to help. And, you know, to end this war, it's very easy. Hamas surrenders and they return the hostages, but return the hostages first. They don't need to be there. They're civilians.
And Remington, who is that on your T-shirt?
This is Nama Levy. This is one of the family shirts. I wear it around a lot because I feel like I need to scream for her. I think we need to scream for all of them. And if it's something where it's dark on my chest all the time in the interviews I do, then maybe it'll bring some kind of awareness everywhere.
Jotam, coming back to you and obviously picking up on the hostages, you were talking just then about the popularity or lack of that Netanyahu has got, partly because he styled himself as Mr. Security and has had the worst breach of security in living memory, but also, of course, for the way perhaps that the hostages haven't been rescued. What are people saying about that in Tel Aviv?
So in the beginning, there was support for the military and for the government to try and get the hostages out by rescuing them simply in military operations. Now, that was successful once. Israel managed to rescue 1 hostage from Gaza. But other than that, the only way Israel has gotten hostages out was with a ceasefire with Hamas, where more than 100 hostages were released. Since then, Israel hasn't managed to get any of them out. In fact, plenty of them have been announced dead in Hamas captivity. In other words, they were killed. And 3 of them were actually also killed by Israeli soldiers. It was a mistake, obviously. So people are starting to be fed up. People are furious with the fact that the government continues to say that the only way to get them out is to put more military pressure on Hamas. Now, that's a strategy that has clearly failed. And for these families, every second of the day counts. Whenever Israel conducts military operations inside Gaza, there is a risk that they might also hurt the hostages. That's just a fact. Obviously, they're trying to avoid that. But to say that it's 100% sure to conduct these operations without hurting the hostages, that's simply false.
Remington, just very quickly, Turkey President Erdogan compared Netanyahu to Hitler. How has that landed in Israel?
I mean, here's the thing, not great, because you kind of are comparing Hitler to Benjamin Netanyahu. It's not a correlation between the 2 of them. I think it's not landing very well, regardless of Netanyahu's unpopularity here. I think at the end of the day, like, anyone who's mentioning that or using any Nazi terminology is just missing the mark altogether.
Okay.
All right, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to Jotam and Remington. And obviously, I'm sure we'll be back to talk to you both with updates in the next few days.